Check, check, check. It seems to be picking up. So, oh, hello. All right. Uh, hello everyone. And welcome to the queer intersectionality panel. We have been trying to get this together for a while now. And I'm really happy that we can do this now. This should be really exciting. I've got a few questions prepped, and I think we should be able to have a great time together, answering some really important stuff and getting some really important perspectives that don't always get the airtime they need. Um, if folks are able to introduce themselves, uh, and maybe just like one or two sentences about yourself, and then just make sure to also share your pronouns, and if possible, um, you know uh, share descriptions of yourself. I, that's a little harder to do, but it helps some folks with eyesight issues and stuff. Um, should we just go in 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 the order of the videos? So that would be Olu,
All
Finn,
right.
Willow, and then Luna.
Cool. So I'm OLU, they, them. I'm wearing a pink top and a pink dress, and I've got locks, and I'm black. Put it to that first. I'm a developer and a content creator and a writer, I guess is what I can say about myself. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, and can you also? Sorry, apologies. Can in terms of the few sentences, also share the perspective you're bringing to this conversation.
Cool. So I am mad, I'm queer, so agender, non-binary, uh, bisexual. Don't know what else to say.
Thank you very much, Finn.
Alrighty, hi everybody. My name is Finn. My pronouns are he, him. A white ginger dude. I'm wearing a t-shirt. Got my arm taped up right. And I am uh, I guess social commentary kind of YouTuber. A lot of videos about masculinity, about queer issues, about leftist issues. I am bisexual, transgender. It's also autistic. So yeah, put it definitely run through that film as well. But yeah,
You're
very
cutting out a
excited to be
bit.
here. Oh, am I? Oh, darn it.
A
Sounds
little bit,
sounds
yeah.
about right. Um, don't know if it's my internet or my microphone, but are you hearing me okay now?
No, you're still cutting out a bit.
If you can hear me, why doesn't someone else go while I mess with my voice and video a little bit to try and fix this?
Sounds
Okay.
good. Although what you just said came through just fine.
Okay, great, good.
So could you just go one more time?
Sorry, I can go one more time?
Yeah, just go over what you said so that we have it clear.
Oh, okay. Right, yeah, sorry about that, everyone. So my name is Finn. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white guy. I'm a ginger, wearing a white t-shirt. And I am a bisexual transgender man and YouTuber. I'm also autistic, and I make a lot of videos about leftist issues, queer issues. Masculinity is a topic that I tend to cover a lot, and yeah, very excited to be here. Very excited to learn from everyone else and share my perspective.
Thank you very much. Hello?
All right. Willow, they, them. I run the Questing Refuge channel. Not really sure how to describe myself, I guess. I have long colored hair, red shirt, a necklace, a white person with a beard, I guess. And I am disabled and autistic and trans, non-binary. Um, and then I guess also the might come up in the discussion is also like I have kids, so that may be part of the policy discussion in some ways, but um, I think that's everything. I don't know. I'm really bad at the intro thing, so
No worries. Are you comfortable sharing what your disabled background is? You don't have to if it's not comfortable.
Oh, no, yeah, not at all. The main thing I've talked about, I guess, is autism. But there's kind of like a mix. I guess for me, that's part of the reason I don't. It's not any worry about divulging anything. It's more just there's miscellaneous chronic pain and other random stuff. Some of it I'm still figuring out, I guess.
No worries.
Yeah.
Good. It's helpful to know your intersectionality, since that's why we're here.
Oh yeah.
Um, but so there's both mental and physical
Right.
stuff. Good to know. Thank you very much. Luna?
Hello, everyone. My name's Luna. For visual, I forgot my camera, so it's just my profile picture, which is an elephant scientist holding a glowing flask that my friend drew for me. But I am queer, I'm agender and intersex and asexual, and I am disabled. I have a plethora of physical disabilities, and I'm also autistic. And then I guess like I'm not really a YouTuber. My background is actually in life sciences, and now I work with supercomputers and helping life sciences use supercomputers for research. I don't remember anything else I was supposed to say for the intro, so that's my intro.
Did you share your pronouns?
Oh, I did not share my pronouns because I'm so used to them being listed next to my name at my work, so I just forgot I needed to. My pronouns are they, them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I will describe myself. I am Adam. I run the YouTube channel that you're on right now, most likely, or you're on my Twitch, one of the two. My YouTube channel is my name, and then it's Adam Splitters Entertainment, which is the name of sort of my general brand and everything like that. I am a white man with very, very dirty blonde hair. Not that the hair is not dirty. The dirty blonde is the color of the hair. Just to be clear, it's almost brown, but I still call it dirty blonde. I'm a cis man. I use pronouns he him. My intersectionality background is I am autistic. I also have ADHD and chronic anxiety. I also am Jewish, which may or may not come up here, but it's still, I think, relevant. I think those are the main things. Yeah. Okay. So, did I share everything that I told everyone to share? I think I
believe
did.
so.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone who is on the panel for coming today. It means a lot that you're all here, and I appreciate how much organization it took to get us all here. This, for the audience, this was delayed several times, which is why there was no promotion in advance. We didn't know whether everything would work out, but here we are.
It's appropriate given the discussion,
Yeah. But yes, so here we are, and so I have a few questions that, or a few prompts, maybe is a better way to describe them, that I would like to go through, and I would like to go through them, like, the responses probably just be in the order that we just went, if that's okay. Although if you don't have anything to say, feel free to say, like, I'll do it next, or I'll do it, whatever, just, we're trying to be inclusive here. So if you're not ready, I want to respect that. I don't know if that has anything to do with intersectionality or that just being human, but still
No, it
trying to
definitely does.
respect people. Um, okay, so the first thing I would like to ask is it is sort of I guess a two-parter kind of, which is but they're sort of part of the same question, which is how does your personal intersectional experience get discussed and or treated in the queer community, and that sort of goes hand in hand with how do the various aspects of your identity form your personal experience of the queer community and pride specifically, especially. So Olu, you go first if that's all right.
So, I'm trying to think. So, as a black person, there's Black Pride in the UK. I'm not sure how many exist in other countries, but that has helped a bit. Like, I didn't enjoy it the first few times I've been, but I am trying to try again this year and see if I like find people that I like, and I'm going with a friend this time rather than just like trying to buddy up people. So that'll probably be easier. But yeah, I think often it feels like pride is a white thing sometimes, and I think that can be quite difficult. But yeah, I don't know. I think people act as if other countries don't have queer people at times, and like other people, like, oh, it's all like doom and gloom for them. If that makes sense. So outside of the West, anyway. But that's one thing. And as a mad person, I think, I think it depends. I think, what do I think? I think I think about that more to answer that question about with the madness in particular, and also with autism. Actually, I didn't think I mentioned that in my introduction, but I'm just as well. But yeah, I think I'd have to think on those two more. But I had an answer for blackness at least.
What country are you in?
The UK.
The UK. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much, Finn.
So I kind of figured that we were all neurodivergent just based on the organizing of the panel. I was like, oh yeah, this is a bunch of neurodivergent people for sure. But yeah, so how does my personal intersectional experience get discussed and or treated within the queer community? That's an interesting one because of course I'm a transgender man who passes. I'm a white transgender man. I do experience chronic pain. I do have invisible disabilities, but for the most part, I'm read as a non-disabled white cisgender man. Is kind of how I move through the world, despite not being those things. Well, I mean, I'm white, but other than that, so it's interesting. I access a lot of sort of immediate social privilege when I enter a space. It's one of the reasons that I kind of choose to be out about my transness. I think it's really, really important to be visible for the people who don't really have the option of whether or not they are. So that's a pretty significant thing that plays a role into not necessarily how I'm treated within the queer community, but how I sort of present myself in the queer community. As far as how I'm treated, that's an interesting thing because I'm often received as a, just sort of white cisgender man. Sometimes I can be met with a little bit of guard by many people, and rightfully so. It can be a little bit alienating just on like a regular human being level, but it sort of keeps me thinking about all of those social privileges that I do kind of move around with, right? That it's not necessarily a reaction to me personally, but it's a reaction to the things that I sort of embody and represent, which is another part of the reason why I think it's important to be out about who I am, just so that the people around me who are more vulnerable than I am can kind of, know about that, right? So yeah, that very much informs my experience in the queer community and my sense of pride, because it is something that I choose. It's not really something that I sort of had to like reconcile with. I had to like teach myself to be proud. It is something that I kind of could have turned my back on, but lean into because I think being queer is awesome. I think it's a really, really rad way to be. I think being neurodivergent is awesome, and I really love that I get to share those experiences with all kinds of other people.
Thank you very much. Hello?
Um, I'm trying to think of a good way to sum up here. So I guess I actually had almost like no experience with like Pride events themselves, and part of that is because of where I am. I guess was stuff like I didn't realize I was queer until after COVID had started, and that is a big barrier for me as far as I'm not really going to go to a mass event where people aren't masking. Because I have learned to manage, like, do a lot of things to manage various disabilities. Um, and because I spent a lot of time with disability justice stuff, I'm very mindful of the direction that stuff's going and the cost that could have. And it's just not worth it, which is complicated. So I guess there's multiple things there. Now, I spent many years kind of, it's actually been about 9 years since I found out I was autistic. So I spent a very long time kind of in parenting groups and various other things, kind of advocating for autism stuff. And so a lot of my framing of things went from there and then to broader disability, because I kind of saw a pattern there where people weren't kind of connecting the dots back to disability, which is creates other problems. And so I definitely look at things a lot through kind of that lens. And then, like I mentioned earlier, like I also have kids who have various neurodivergence and other things, and are also exploring possible queer identities and stuff like that as well. And so I come at this from, I guess, a lot of different angles. And then part of that, and I guess this whole thing also has made it. Trying to think how to even word that, right? Like when I found out I was autistic, there's an element of like integrating that into your identity and kind of like all of that. And so there is kind of this weird space here where the little bit of interaction I've got with kind of queer communities and stuff has been fantastic. It gives me a lot of hope. While simultaneously, I feel in a very weird spot there. And I experienced this with autism too, where there's kind of like you feel, it's like who you are, but like also you don't know enough a little bit. And so there's this weird space where I don't, no one's really necessarily done anything to make me feel like an outsider per se, but I kind of feel like in this weird in between space. I'm not really sure how to word that. And part of that, I guess, too, and it's up earlier, where it's like a weird thing, but like there's an element of like, I'm also, I think, a lot older than probably everybody here. And so that also kind of plays a factor because I'm already in my 40s, I guess. So just I'm 41. So there's that too. Hopefully I've touched on everything, I think, but that's kind of where I'm coming from.
If I may just ask quickly, do you experience any like ageism or anything? Like any, any like, there's tends to be a sort of prevalent idea that queer people are young people who, So I'm curious, just to follow up.
I guess yes and no. I don't feel like I've experienced a lot of more like what you'd consider more, and I guess this is most true with disability too. There is, although disability has more blatant people being worrisome, I guess, on an individual. So I would say I haven't experienced like an individual necessarily being ageist in any sort of way. However, there most definitely is like structural things where, like, okay, for example, another, I guess, to add to this, I'm just kind of being generally isolated. I don't have any connection with my family anymore, things like that. So like I basically just have my wife and our kids, right? And so with that, I've been trying to make connections, and that means I have to kind of accept certain risks in doing that. And so part of that, when I'm looking at, right, I've never used like a lot of the more popular now, like dating apps, various things like this to like find friends or stuff. I'm trying to do that stuff, and I'm just kind of running into things where I think age definitely plays a factor, where most people using these things are much younger than me. So, and it is kind of weird, right? Because like if I'm looking in there's an element of like, on one hand, I mean, I focus also on children's rights a lot. So on one hand, I very don't like the idea of like this idea of having separated by age, like you only have friends within your age range, stuff like that. I don't think that's very good. But on the flip side, there is an element of like, if I'm using one of those things, if I see like a 25-year-old, there's an element of like, I don't know, this is weird. Like I feel there's I don't know, there's just stuff in there where it's hard to unpack on those apps a little bit. And so I guess it definitely does play a a role in there. A lot of the other things I think that play a role also already hit me kind of from a disability lens, so I don't really think about it much. But yeah, I think yeah, I'm glad you asked that.
Great, thank you. And I'll be happy to sort of go around a second time here and just like, if you've thought of anything, just to go back through quickly and make sure that you get a chance to air some of your personal experiences. And to be clear, like, make sure to consider things that are normal for you, but that other people may not be aware of. And like, Willow, what you were saying about not going to Pride is an important experience as part of the queer community. So think about the things you are not doing as well. So just consider that as we go through, and then I want to go back and just make sure everyone gets a chance to add anything that they maybe hadn't thought of initially. So Luna?
Yeah. So for me, I grew up pretty rural, so there wasn't really like a pride parade I could have gone to that was within like an hour or two of my house. And then I moved to like the Portland, Oregon area a couple of like 2017, and I actually did try to go to Pride, but was on the subway system, not subway, but their max system, and had like knee braces and hip braces on, and had someone who was also very clearly going to the same place, but I was new to the area and didn't know what stop to get off, and I asked them, and they like looked me up and down and went, I don't think Pride's really your scene. And that's literally the only time I tried to go to Pride. Because then like, then COVID and everything happened. So like I can say that for me, having like visible physical disability has pushed me away from Pride to some extent specifically, but then I also was like a returning student, so then I was around like a bunch of 18-year-olds and I was like 27. So it's just like I felt like it was like hard to try and like make friends in this new place I was in, because I was just like, I could be your babysitter actually. So it was definitely kind of like this weird space to exist in, and I've now moved again, but I've had some more luck this time in finding queer people closer to my age, which does help a lot. I do have quite a few friends who are younger than me, and they like say that I kind of feel like a big sibling role for them, which I'm happy to do. But like, there is something to be like, I think there's a lot of importance, like you were saying earlier, with like having relationships that are older and younger than you, so you can kind of have that whole breadth of it community experience. But it can be really hard to be like the only one of a particular age group, especially if everyone else is like grouped around the same like couple of years. Like college is generally like within the same 4-year age group. So yeah, it's definitely, I can say that like my age, my like background experience of like not really being familiar with like a big city and how to like make friends, and like the cultural differences from growing up like in like rural South versus like a larger city on the West Coast is very different. So I think a lot of my personal intersectional experiences have made finding like, I guess, like quote unquote traditional queer community that you would see like at Pride is a little bit more difficult. I am also like incredibly white passing, because my skin, one of my disorders, like I cannot actually tan. It's a disorder that's adjacent to albinism, so I still have like darker colored hair and eyes, but like I have to be really careful because I can get a sunburn through my window if I don't wear my sunscreen. So like the palest person, but so I do have like a lot of inherent white privilege, but then I culturally am not white, so then it's kind of like this weird thing where people will sometimes assume that I know something, and I'm like, I've never been to a white wedding before, and then someone like looks at me weird, and I'm like, I don't know what I should be doing here actually. Like, so what's the custom that we're going with? Because it's very different than my experiences with weddings. Um, so it's kind of just this weird, vaguely feeling like an outsider, even if you're around your peers, I guess would be a good way to describe my experience with it.
Thank you. And sorry, what's your sort of racial/cultural background?
So my dad's side of the family is white. I don't really know them very well. My mom's side of the family is Cajun and Roma. Bit more of like, I guess I'm not really ever sure how to describe the Cajun and Roma communities. They're like they're communities that are known like historically have been ethnic minorities for a long time. So there's often a lot more like parallel cultural like discourses around it that is like similar to like being Jewish, where you're like, I can kind of understand like the dominant culture I'm in, but there's not really like a place where you go where you're like, you are the dominant culture ever. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As for me, I'm interested in talking about this because this is sort of what inspired the idea of this panel in the first place. For for Pride, just from a disability perspective, just as someone with pretty significant sensory issues at times. It sort of depends, but certainly it can be, and as well as significant social anxiety that is connected to my chronic anxiety and everything, and just feeling overwhelmed. The idea of going to a pride parade specifically, which is generally the most sort of, I almost want to say, marketed version of pride, of that celebration. It's the easiest one to know about when it's happening and all that stuff, is not an option for me. It's too much for me. Like, I would not feel welcome there because it would be too overwhelming. And like, I don't see, like, literally just like, I don't get like newsletters or anything that sort of say, here's a local pride thing you can go to that's like quiet and just it's about people like connecting with each other or something like that. Like, it's just not something I see. It doesn't mean it's not there, but in terms of visibility, it's harder to find. Marketed is maybe a bad way to frame the pride parade, but it's what it feels like, certainly, even if it's not what it is.
I think that's pretty important framing, actually, in a lot of contexts. I don't know.
Okay, I'm glad.
Rainbow capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also say that, oh god, I forgot to say this when I was doing my introduction. This is what I missed. I'm heteroromantic asexual. I can't believe I forgot to mention that on a queer intersectionality panel. Especially because of how much it interacts with my, identity as a man and as a cis man and as a white cis man, and the amount of power that can give me, which I only really started wrestling with after the whole Black Lives Matter protests and everything. But I'm in like some spaces online that are queer often, and there's always like this little voice of doubt in my head about like, are you queer enough? Because for all intents and purposes, like, people could look at me and the fact that I'm a cis man interested in women, and only women, really, or at least femmes, and like be like, you're not queer, you're straight. And like, even if people aren't saying that to me, there's this little voice in my head that's like, they could, and would they be 100% wrong? You know, some people with this identity even call themselves straight asexuals, and for me, like, that's a sense of insecurity of, you know, I'm not straight because straight means heterosexual. And to me again, like, everyone is, you know, everyone has the right to choose their own label. But to me, when I think about straight, I think about heterosexual, and that's not me. And so the idea that someone could call me straight, you know, and that being in the queer community, like, asexuality is not there yet in the way that it needs to be. It's started, and that's great. You know, Yasmin Benoit is a huge asexual activist who just led a pride, which was amazing. But she's also gotten just an absolute flood of hate for it. So, you know, I mean, not that any queer person doesn't get a flood of hate at some point or another, but, you know, it was very much centered around her not being, not looking ace, you know, not, and so there is very much a gatekeeping issue within the aspec community that we have to deal with, and we haven't quite dealt with, but it's also in relationship to the wider queer community. And so overall, it's just another one of those examples of, like, I am part of this, but there's this bit of doubt in my head that makes me feel somewhat ostracized, like many of you have said about your own experiences. So I thank you for all that, and I will just, you know, again, like I said, does anyone have anything they wish to add to what they said before?
You bringing up that ace is not always the most accepted aspect of queer, because it's like, well, you can quote unquote straight pass, so it's not really a problem for you. Could have been a contributing factor to those guys telling me on the subway that I was that it wasn't going to be my scene because I was wearing an Ace Pride shirt on top of having leg and hip braces. So, like, that I could have just been out of myself as like a fringe part of this group in two different dynamics. So I could have had that experience based on either of those or a combination of both. I will say for Yasmin Benoit specifically, I feel like she probably experiences a lot of discrimination because of the ace phobia you see in community, but it is, I feel, almost neglectful to not mention that she is also a Black woman, and
Yes,
that
apologies, I should have
adds a huge aspect to her experience as someone who's queer and at all. But then she also has done like a lot of work as a model and as a lingerie model, and then that really hits against the dichotomy of, well, if you're ace, you can't do anything sexual once in your life, otherwise you're not really ace. And it's just like, so she gets that increased complexities of her identity and her experience that makes it so people feel more justified, even though they're completely wrong to. They feel more justified in judging her.
And it's also very connected to the Oppression Olympics issue that many communities have, not just the queer community, but many marginalized groups have issues with Oppression Olympics type things, which for anyone who hasn't heard that phrase before, is basically like, you're not oppressed enough to need the attention that other groups also need, and maybe need more because you're not as oppressed. Stuff like that. But yes, I apologize for leaving that all out with Yasmin Benoit. I hadn't thought to really go into that. Not because I didn't consider it important, because just in the things I was saying, it didn't feel like the immediate thing. But I really appreciate you going into all those details about her, Luna. That's very appreciated, because those are extremely important to ideas of intersectionality.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, tack on what you were saying about the oppression Olympics, I think like it's an important thing to bring up because it kind of fundamentally misunderstands intersectionality and what it is, right? Which is what makes it so. The things we're talking about that's alienating. Part of what makes it so hard is because it is so complicated. So like, a lot of people will think like because your identity is oppressed over multiple vectors as if it's like an additive thing, and it's like, well, that's not how that works. It's more like where this overlaps, you have a specific unique experience based on these different parts of your identity and experiences. And so it's unique. There's not really a way of saying more or less. And yeah, there are certain things you can point to and go like, well, generally speaking, if you're dealing with the police or something, like these things are going to end up worse, or you can do like specific things, but you can't like generalize in some way. It's not an additive thing. It's each thing is changing and how they overlap. Like even hearing, how you're talking about like how some people will say they're straight and asexual and stuff like that. I'm not going to assume for everyone, but I do think that like it is pretty safe to assume that a large part of that is kind of like internalized stuff, right? Like we see this in disability as well and other things, right? Like there's a lot of autistic people who, again, they don't. I mean, honestly, a lot of disabled people in general. Very few disabled people like really accept disability as like an identity. They more see it as a thing they have, and so then like on things that are a little bit more accepted or can be more passing, a lot of people don't tend to connect to having disability at all, and they'll stay using like euphemisms, saying that like they're not disabled, actually they're differently abled or some other nonsense. And it's again, I'm sure there are rare exceptions where people, it's not from internalized stuff, but it's an important part of the discussion, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I wouldn't want to, push on anyone that like, oh, you're labeling yourself that because of internalized whatever. But I'm sure there are at least some people who identify as straight asexual because of internalized asphobia, and I think that is a valid thing to bring up, and I hope some people maybe reflect on that. Finn or Olu, any thoughts that you would like to follow up on?
I have some.
Mhm.
Look, because I was thinking about Luna's point on being rural, because I didn't grow up like in a rural area, but like outside of London, I feel like where I live now, I lived like maybe an hour away, and that was a completely different world for queer things. Because I think they have Pride now for like they've had Pride for like 2 years. So before that, I think like they used to do like experiments in my hometown where they'd be like two men walking down the street holding hands and see how much like abuse they get held of them and stuff like that. Like it's not a good place to grow up as a queer person. But hopefully, I think now that that Pride's come there, hopefully it has changed it a little bit. Like my friends who are still there have had like a better experience. But I think I would never like have travelled from like my hometown to like London to go to Pride, because it would have felt like dangerous. And even like, because like, what do you tell your parents you were doing? And they can see on the news, obviously, that like Pride was on because everyone's talking about it. So it's not like the kind of thing you just like sneak out to. And on the other point, I think with this disability stuff too, I was going to say like the general disabled point is like, because I have like foot issues I didn't mention as well, I forgot that too. But like walking for such a long distance, I don't know if all Pride parades are like this, but like I guess you sort of walk to where you stand and then you stand there for hours sometimes, or you walk around and follow the route, and that's way too much walking for me. I can't. And like lack of toilets is the other one, and like lack of food and like litter and like the sensory stuff. I think I find that quite hard as well. So those are the other points I wanted to raise.
I find it really interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just was thinking. But go ahead, Finn.
These sort of we've all kind of touched on it a little bit. We've all touched on, and first of all, I think that there are very few things as queer as doubting whether or not you are queer, and feeling like you're not queer enough seems to be like a very sort of pivotal queer experience. And I find it really interesting that every single one of us kind of dipped into that a little bit. It's like, well, I can't, I don't want to speak out of turn. Like, am I queer enough to? It's like, yes, you absolutely 110% are. If for no other reason than the fact that you have that concern. But I find it interesting, a couple things. One, the sort of like colonization of Pride and queer spaces, the sort of rainbow capitalism angle of things, the fact that Pride parades are very much not accessible. That's not the point. It's more about particularly for the bigger ones in the cities, excuse me, that they are one big advertising party, that they don't take into account not just neurodivergent people who might want to partake as well, not just disabled people who literally can't access these events because there aren't accessible bathrooms, there aren't easy ways to get around, like they're just not welcoming to disabled people. Not just that angle of it, but that it sort of highlights at least a lot of Pride events that I have been to highlight this sort of young, conventionally attractive, non-disabled, white archetype of a person. And it's very interesting that this sort of, whitewashed and, shall we say, more appealing to the normies outside of queer spaces is the image that tends to get promoted at Pride a lot of the time. And the litter, the disrespect for the environment is also a significant issue there because, of course, there are all kinds of things to explore in what queerness is and dismantling the ideas of, colonization, consumption, etc. But the other thing that I really wanted to kind of touch on is just to sort of roll off of what Willow was saying, is that this idea that people exist closer to straightness or the oppression Olympics, that you have to like tick all these boxes or be this oppressed in order to ride the Pride. It's empowering the idea that there is a default human to begin with, that you are however many steps away from the straight, white, cisgender, non-disabled, European descent specifically, man. That this is, sort of the archetypal human, and if you exist in any kind of proximity to that, you have, some kind of social privilege that would exclude you. Now, it is true that you have social privilege under systems of oppression, absolutely. But if queerness is about dismantling those systems of oppression, and this is where I get into my whole thing about the importance of queering that very archetype, of breaking away from the idea that we're all sort of orbiting around this central human, and instead we start questioning how we queer straightness. Like, how do we queer straightness? How do we sort of break the gender box of manhood? How do we start doing those things? I won't get off on that rant, but just, something to throw out there. I hope all of that made sense.
It's like, to summarize it even shorter, it feels almost a little bit like the queer equivalent of blood quantum, where it's just like, this is not necessary. Like, it's your culture, it's your community. That's the important part of the identity, not how many girls you have dated as a woman, or but how trans are you really? Which one's more trans out of this scenario? Or just whatever intrusive thought in your head is going, you're not clear enough. It's like, that's literally how they divide us. So like, let's maybe put that to the side and just right into the recycling where it goes. We can use that for better energy in our lives.
We've actually already been here for an hour, so let's make sure to move on to the other questions. But this does lead directly into the next one, which is, what way do you believe others need to shift their approach to the queer community and Pride to create a welcoming space for you and those with similar needs? Olu, you want to go first?
I think I need to think about that a bit more actually.
Okay.
To have a good thoughts.
Finn?
So that I'm gonna try and keep this brief because again, I'm not struggling to be seen in a lot of ways at Pride events. Now, at a glance, being a trans man, that makes things a little bit more complicated, right? I think that trans masculine people often get erased from the conversation. It's kind of, we either sort of get lumped in with women specifically for the ways that we experience, like medical misogyny, certain types of violence that, to avoid, TOS and whatnot, I won't go into, that we are more uniquely targeted by that kind of thing. Or we get lumped in with cis men and therefore, don't experience various types of oppression. I think that sort of more effort to uplift transmasculine voices, particularly transmass people of color who get even less visibility than white trans guys get, and that ain't much to begin with. Really, really important. I also, to sort of get back to something that's been brought up already, queer spaces that are a little bit more neurodivergent friendly would be absolutely amazing. I have been to exactly one drag show in my life, and I love drag. I love watching it from the comfort of my home on the television. But it was the reason I bring it up is because this event, I went there, it was in like a party room, it was loud, flashing lights, there were a million people, I could smell everyone. It was a lot. It was intense. However, this venue had a room that was separate from the actual performance room, and there were couches, and it was quiet, there was no music, there were no scents. It was just like, oh, okay, are you feeling overwhelmed? Here you go. Here's a space. Come be a nerd and have a conversation with people quietly at a reasonable volume. And that was really cool. It was really, really rad that they had that. So it was something to kind of like, to any organizers who might come across this, having a quiet space for people to go to, perfection. Love it. Love that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Fully agree. Willow?
Yeah, I love, just to add on that, I love seeing that, like, I see, like, some venues, at least when I was out near Seattle, in general, that became a much more common thing when I was out there, which was really cool to see. Because I do think that's a main thing, because one frustration I see when people talk about this sometimes is, instead of talking about it from this approach where we're kind of, saying, like, what can we do to be seen, sometimes people kind of come with this, like, very combative, like, kind of attacking the people who are doing certain things, and it's like, well, there is an element of, and I know I've mentioned before, like, I think it's really important to have these discussions framed through conflicting needs, because there is an element of, like, I can see exactly why Proud needs to be really loud and everything, like, all this, right? Like, I don't want that to go away. I think that is very important for very good reasons. So it makes sense that comes first in most areas. But little things like having, a sensory room where people can have a quiet and feel like it doesn't have to be much sometimes, and just that little gesture is enough where you kind of feel included, right? Again, you were thought of. You're not invisible to what's happening, and so I think that kind of stuff can go a long way. And then obviously, like, outside of that, like, even if there's just no way to make Pride fully accessible for someone, just trying to remember to do occasional other, even smaller events, I think, in areas is really important, because at the end of the day, like, you're never going to make like one event accessible to everyone, and that's okay. But again, as accessible as possible. And then I guess the biggest thing for me is going back to, I guess, masks and stuff, because I do think that it worries me. Like, I since COVID, I guess, like, I feel like that is kind of it's something that I haven't really been fully reconciled yet, where I feel about the world, to be honest. It's very because I am a very generally optimistic person. However, the state of things is quite bleak, and I feel like that's a very clear example that worries me a lot. And part of that is because I have so much background disability, where I know where this leads, and I also feel like, seeing history with HIV in the queer community, obviously, it is upsetting to see COVID get largely ignored, because I think that it's a mass disabling event that's just continuing to go on and basically left unchecked. And it does worry me, because it's something where it's like, you're not only not making it accessible to people, you are directly putting our community in danger. And so I don't know. And I'm not sure where to go with that, as more of just a plea of, like, and this is where it's tricky, because it's one of those things where at this point a lot of people just, you're being annoying, and I'm kind of dropping this. But it's such a small thing to be able to do, just wearing a mask even. And it's just one of those things where we have the history to see where that goes and who's going to get the really shitty end of the stick when, like, if you get like long COVID or disabled from this or other effects, like, our community is going to be one of the ones that hits the hardest. So it's like, I don't know. It's just that's something to me where it's like, it's not even just an accessibility thing. It's literally just part of caring for each other and taking care of yourself. I don't know. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I would love to just quickly say, I have never stopped masking, and it's for exactly that reason. I have two friends who are both queer and immunocompromised, and they're not even like local to me. They're just, I mostly talk to them online, but just like the fact that I care about people who, and it's not even, it's beyond just having those two friends, but obviously those two friends make it much more personal. Just like, I don't want people like that to get hurt, so I mask. It's not
Right.
an overly complicated motivation.
Yeah. Well, and even just like, I'm glad you do that. Like, to take, because I guess the other thing is, I think like it is important to view it as like you're taking care of yourself. Like, I'm glad that you, right, like, yeah, like obviously certain people are more directly in danger, but like, okay, part of the reason I do it, like, most of my disabilities I'm able to manage to a point where like I'm okay most of the time. I'm kind of juggling different pains. But there's an element of like if I get long COVID, I can pretty much assume that a lot of work I've done to maintain stuff is just gone. Like I don't know what level I'll be able to do anything at. And so I think there's an element of like, well, it's an important part in general. Like basically, it's kind of like over a long enough timeline, everyone's going to experience this ability. It might be temporary, but like pretty much everyone's going to experience it. And so there is an element of like, the more, while certain things are better, it's like the more times you get infected by this, and we're still, and I guess part of the worrying thing here is with like COVID, a lot of the science, like it comes across as fear mongering, but it's like a lot of the science in this case actually backs up these fears. Or it's like we don't fully understand what COVID does to us yet, and there's some pretty worrying things there. And so it's kind of like, and that's why, I mean, there had been parallels actually mentioned with HIV because of that idea, where like part of the reason HIV was so devastating is it worked so differently, and we didn't fully understand what it was doing. And obviously, then it got overlooked because they didn't care, because certain communities would get hit. But like that's kind of happening here as well, right? Like this is hitting certain communities more, and they don't really care because they just want the economy going and stuff. And I get it because it's hard, and I understand even like the peer pressure of like it's, not only do I get looked at because I'm like openly trans or something, but like I get looked at wearing a mask, right? Like it's one more thing where you kind of feel like you're putting a target on yourself a little bit, and that's unfortunate. But there is an element of like, I guess it's like it's not just about people who are vulnerable. It's also like, please, like, also take care of yourself because you're going to be vulnerable. Like, if you just keep getting COVID or something, the odds of you becoming disabled are quite high, and I don't think people really realize that. And you're increasing your odds each time you get it, and you don't always know you have it, right? Again, like it can be asymptomatic, so it's yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We've been going on for a long time. I want to make sure we continue. Luna, what about you? Do you want me to read the question again?
No,
Okay.
I'm okay. I wrote it down.
Right.
But I'll say that like I agree a lot with the masking stuff because I am someone who's also immunocompromised, and I legitimately did not leave my home until 2023, even though it was not necessarily the safest living environment for me due to the outside world and germs literally being more dangerous for me. So that was super fun. So anyone who's taking those precautions for people, always appreciated. You help more people than you know. But I will say that it's really frustrating for me a lot of times, especially with like the classic Pride parade, where it's like, we have to engage with so much rainbow capitalism to be able to go to any queer event, but like Disney World legitimately would be easier for me to go to with my disabilities, and that's the most capitalistic point in the world that you can go to as a tourist. So can we, if we have to engage in capitalism, can we at least steal some of the stuff from the Disney gays to make this easier for the rest of us? Just to put it in like the most lighthearted way possible. It just there's a pretty big point of frustration because it's like people will like, oh, that's capitalism, baby, and it's like, well, but literally we have examples of wildly successful capitalism that is more accessible. So I feel like we could be doing a little bit more. And I think that changes from event to event, but just like if you only take one thought from anything I've said and you are an organizer for a Pride event, please just take a look at how Disney does whatever you're doing for accessibility and see if there's any of that stuff that you can adapt. Like, I don't know, if you're going to have sponsorships at Pride, then have them sponsor mobility aids for people or have them sponsor a quiet room. You can have the Pepsi quiet space for someone at Pride, and then they can be a proud sponsor of Pride, but also make Pride more inclusive. So it seems like there's a lot of potential that people aren't tapping. If we have to engage with capitalists, we should at least make it something that benefits us, and that feels like a really good way to make it so that our community does benefit a little bit from having, you know, all of the corporate sponsorships at Pride.
For sure.
Yeah. That's my abbreviated version.
I really appreciate that. That's, you know, I think those are great. You know, it's very easy to just say like, oh, you know, we don't want to engage in capitalism because it's all unethical, but like we do live in capitalism, so we should make the best of that. We should use the tools that capitalism has provided us as long as we do live here, and we can still work against that in the long term. But in the short term, we should take advantage of it to the best of our ability.
Like, if it's going to be shoved in our face, at least let us have it be shoved in our face on our terms, where it's like, well, fine, if you insist on being here, you're benefiting us.
Yeah.
Or you can be not here. And that seems like a legitimately more beneficial compromise.
Absolutely. Olu, we had skipped over you, so I'm going to ask whether you thought of anything. We haven't really had any talk about racial dynamics, so if you have anything to say on that, that's important too.
So yeah, I was going to say, on the taking from capitalism what we can thing, I went to a lot of alt-Pride events once I moved to London, I think. So like smaller events where they would like do things like sponsor a taxi before like to the event and back again. But they were like in parks, so again it's like not the most accessible. But it was like a different way of like interacting with the idea of being prideful rather than doing corporate pride. And I think like maybe like big events could like sponsor smaller events. Like if you can't come to this, then maybe you could come to, I don't know, PepsiCo, whatever, small in a building rather than on the street sort of thing. I don't know, that would be quite fun. I think like something like that. I'm trying to think about actual like things they could actually do rather than just like general attitudes towards pride.
No, that's
but
great.
I think like, yeah.
We're not sponsored by Pepsi, just so everyone knows.
No, we're not sponsored at all, which is why we were able to keep postponing it.
That's the secret, actually. That is maybe how capitalism helps streamers, is forcing us to stick to deadlines.
Yeah, perhaps. The fact that I'm not monetized yet has probably helped me not have to pressure myself as much. At the same time, I probably could use some deadlines. But then again, I was trying to do one every month, and I was like, that's actually not sustainable for me or my editor. So, you know. Great, that's wonderful. You know, for me, it is absolutely, you know, I think what we've all said is, you know, we just need more spaces. Spaces outside of these major public things. It's great to have things that are major and public that say we're here, we're clear, no, we're not going anywhere. Those are important, but it's also important to make sure that we have spaces that feel safe and that feel like, you know, that tell people that they are seen and thought about. You know, the queer community is a big community, but we also have, you know, our individual communities within the queer community, and those are valuable. And, you know, if there is like a small, you know, like Finn, like you were saying, there was a small space where people could like nerd out a bit. like, that helps build community too. That's not, and that's its own form of strength and of pride and of community. And those spaces are really important. It's easy, I think, to get caught up in the idea of what pride should be, but pride should be for us, and it should be for queer people, and whatever queer people are, and whoever queer people are, and there should be an effort to create spaces for every kind of queer person, and for those people to build their own smaller communities within the bigger community. And that's how you build a stronger, bigger community, is by having people see each other as people, which requires these smaller spaces that are a little more accessible and a little more willing to engage with people on their own terms, rather than, hey world, we're all happy, actually. We're happy with ourselves and you can't do anything about it. Which is great. It really is great to have that, but it's not enough on its own, because that doesn't actually build community the way we need, in my opinion, at least. And all of the things we talked about how that does exclude people inevitably. It's white, it's young, it's attractive, it's in many ways capitalistic, it's not accessible to disabled people of all kinds, and so inherently that kind of exclusivity damages the ability to build strong community in the way that the future needs, in my opinion, at least. Let's go on to the next question. We've got two more, by the way. But if people need to go at some point, we can talk about just winding down, regardless. So I just want to make that clear. Number 4 is, it's easy to get focused on the struggles we find ourselves experiencing due to how our identities are treated. So what is, like, one positive way that your intersectional experience has impacted you, or a moment that you felt seen and loved within the queer community? OLU?
I have a lot of really great queer friends and family, like chosen family, so I feel very blessed by that. Like, because I always get, I don't know, in the poly community, I always get people saying, like, how do you find chosen family? And, like, I don't know what to tell you. They just found me. I didn't do anything special. So I think that's probably the main thing. Like, I feel very held by people that I know well in the queer community.
Finn?
I need some time to think about this one, so please feel free to skip over me for now.
Okay. Willow?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add a little bit to, because I don't feel like I have a ton of community, I guess, but I will say even just a little bit of time I've spent in, like, queer exchange groups or things like that, it gives me a lot of hope, just, like, seeing even interactions, because I do think that there is a large space here of just kind of taking care of one another. I guess I have been going to someone tried to start up kind of like a queer family support group. So it's just for, like, queer people who are parents, to meet up, and that's only been going for a couple months. But it's been really nice. I guess I'm still hoping to make, like, better friendships, like, through this stuff, but it does give me a lot of hope, and I suspect that as I look for community, it is, the saving grace will be, like, queer community. I think is probably where I'm going to have the easiest time doing that. So I guess that's all I got, I think, right now.
I would also, suggest people think about online experiences, not just in person, because that's obviously online is an important space for queer people. Obviously there's some better places than others online, but in general, I would say that. Luna?
Can you read the question again? so I can
Sure.
make sure I actually capture it.
Sure. It's easy to get focused on the struggles we find ourselves experiencing due to how our identities are treated. So, what is at least one positive way your intersectional experience has impacted you, or a moment that you felt seen and loved within the queer community?
Yeah. I think I will have some trouble answering this specifically about queer community because I'm still navigating finding a space in that. I can say I think that that will be an easier quest for me now, especially post going through college as a disabled person, because there's nothing quite like paying thousands of dollars to be in a classroom when you physically cannot open the door to be in the classroom. That makes you like aggressively fight for it. And then I became known on my campus for my propensity to fight for things and throw those doors open for me and then also for people behind me, to the point that I got a permanent student position on like accessibility council for that school. So but that really has primed me to be more of an advocate for making like spaces have to accept people who are maybe not on their main focus. I can, without doxing my school or anything, my third day on the campus in America, we have Title IX for if you have issues with in different kinds of discrimination, and I had to file Title IX complaint on my third day at that campus. So like it was an uphill battle. That was after an hour-long conversation of trying to politely tell my teacher to not call me a racial slur, and that like call me the identity that like my ethnicity goes by instead. And he was like, no, it's fine. I had some friends and they told me it was fine once. And I was like, that's cool for your friends, I guess. So it was a struggle. Yeah, but with those experiences in trying to navigate spaces and then not really having as much success like at first until I like started to fight for it more. And what really got me to fight for it is I'm paying a lot of money to be here, but then was seeing these 18-year-olds that I was going to school with when I was like 27, 28. And I was just like, and they just felt like they had to take it because they were used to dealing with that kind of stuff in high school and not having the authority as a child to like push back against whatever person was just kind of belittling them. And I was just like, hold on, no, wait. You took out student loans to be here. You're going to be paying off this experience for the next 10 years of your life. The least they can do is treat you like a human being. This is how we can do it. And that really helped me a lot. And I think that that will continue to help me eventually kind of forcibly make space in the queer spaces I try to go into. Of just like, you can't have a inclusive queer space if it's, you know, at the top of a flight of stairs. Like, that's just not how that physically works. Or like an inclusive queer space in a city that is predominantly not white, if you go to the queer meetup and everyone there is white. It's like, well, you didn't do it. Like, you might be trying, but you did not meet the majority of your community to bring them here with you. And I tend to really bring a lot of that like marginalized anger, not specifically at people in the queer community, but like we need to be angry like about this collectively. How are we going to change it collectively? And I've gotten better at firing people up about that. So
that's great.
That's how
I'm really happy that you got recognized for that and you got, you know, put in a position where you can do that better. That to me is a big positive thing here, is that you fought for it and you got seen for it and you got a chance.
I did have the substantial leg up of I won't sue you if you make this position on the campus, and suddenly a lot of universities agree with you a lot more because they were trying to get me to sign a paper to say that I wouldn't sue them, and I was like, this is the condition for me to not sue. So like I kind of had the winning hand there, and I was like, how do I use this? Because I wasn't going to deal with the whole court case.
Makes sense.
But they didn't know that.
Still, I mean, that's a huge win. That's a huge win, and I hope you can recognize that as a win. That's the kind of thing we want to celebrate. Is sure, like, yeah, there's a lot of struggle there getting to that point, but you got a huge win, and let's recognize that win. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to highlight with this question. What are the wins? Even if we had to struggle to get there, what are the wins? You know? Finn, can we return to you? Have you thought of something?
Yeah. It's interesting, just what Luna was saying. It marginalized people, particularly like visibly marginalized people, visible minorities, be it race or disability, or any combination thereof, have that pressure on them to be like smaller, to like not make a fuss, and like to just kind of like disappear and not be a problem. And it's interesting how much of it is, people will say stop making it about you, when what they're really saying is stop not making it about me. And I just think that's like, I'm glad that you kind of had that awakening moment, Luna, where you were like, you know what, no, this is bullshit. But yeah, I think that in my experiences, and I can't go into too much detail here just for like privacy reasons, but through volunteer work, and paid work in the past, working with children and youth, they're a lot more out. They're a lot more comfortable. They have generally expressed a lot less of a need to put themselves in very specific boxes. I'm noticing that there's a lot more sort of freedom of expression in the identities of young people. That's one of the things that like just really, really warms my heart. It's incredibly encouraging. It's not just, because I've worked with younger people as a mentor, but it's not just that. It's like I get to feel encouraged by them. I get to feel empowered by them, and their sort of unapologetic queerness and how they approach their own identities has been huge for me. That, and just doing work as a YouTuber, particularly tackling the topic of masculinity, I get some pushback. I get some whining. You can't challenge patriarchy without people turning it into a dominance battle, because, of course. But the vast majority of responses that I get from other men in particular tend to be really positive, really, really kind, really, like thanking me for encouraging just a different expression of masculinity, an exploration of masculinity. Messages from guys who say things like, I had no idea that I could just do these things and not have to fucking explain it to anybody. Like, I didn't know that I could do that. And, your channel helped me get there. And so to get kind of back to that thing that I was saying before about how do we queer the power archetypes? How do we queer the things that we have assigned power to? I've seen a lot more of that happening. I've seen young people expressing themselves more and not feeling the need to shrink themselves. And I've seen particularly cisgender men breaking out of a lot of the thinking that reinforces many of the ills that we face to begin with. And that's been great.
Wonderful. I think I've had more experiences than I can think of right now. I don't know how many more, but I've had a few where I felt really seen. But the one I can think of right now was the second video essay I ever put out was an ace perspective on sexless Hollywood, where there's been this sort of reoccurring conversation, and I put conversation sort of in quotes because it's really not a conversation so much as it is a fight about like whether sex scenes should be in Hollywood at all, or whether they're disappearing completely. And it's like, those are two very different positions, so what the hell is actually going on? So I took a look at that debate through this perspective and sort of said, like, okay, why do both sides believe what they believe, and why and what are we actually dealing with? Like, what do we actually need to do and to talk about to actually address whatever concerns there are concerning this particular topic? And, you know, it was, again, like my second ever video essay, and the first one I did really as a video essayist. It's the first one I did with my current editor, and it just, like, was really, it was really something I'm still one of my favorite video essays I've ever done. B, you know, Jesse, Jesse Earl, aka Jesse Gender, etc., you know, was willing to record some lines in it and was supportive of it, and I'm honored to today be able to call her a friend. At the time, you know, I didn't know her, but she's just someone I looked up to, and, you know, and having her take part, and I still look up to her, to be clear, but, you know, but having her being willing to support that was huge. And it's, you know, still one of my most popular videos, which is, you know, especially since it's age gated, you know, for obvious reasons. It was just like, oh man, this has really hit people really well. Like, this is something that people value. This is a perspective that matters, and it addresses this conversation that people have been stuck on, you know, and it gives new parts to that, new things to talk about that actually allow us to think about things. And just the way that was really successful and all that stuff, that was just a moment that felt like so validating for me of just being like, I have something meaningful to say from my experiences. And also just thinking about, like, oh, like, how does my asexuality impact me as a man, and the ways that I view masculinity, which has been really interesting to think about because I inherently have a distance from one of the key pillars of toxic masculinity, which is sexual dominance. So that's been interesting to think about as well. Yeah. And let's get to the final question.
Can I have one small thing?
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
I don't want to drag it on, but I did want to reemphasize, like, I'm so glad you mentioned earlier about, like, shining importance on, like, online, and I guess I wanted to circle back to that real quick because it is true, and I can't believe I overlooked that, because yeah, I mean, especially being disabled, like, online is where a lot of us form communities, and I mean, heck, I might not have recognized myself as being queer without being in these spaces, to be honest. Learning a lot from several people, not only, like, learning a lot and making me think about things, but, like, also just the recognition, like, these little moments that, like, they're seemingly really small things, but, like, I still remember, you know, the first time I was out, like, having Mandy like, you know, shouted me out kind of like on Trans Day of Visibility or something. Like, these little things, like, I'll never forget that. Like, that really stood out to me. Or even, like, I know, Finn, you were looking for, like, some creative stuff. Like, I messaged you like, oh, hey, I guess I was like, I'm still sometimes shy about including myself in, like, queer stuff. And, like, you were like, oh, you're already on there. Like, I already wanted to include it. Like, that, I can't express how much that meant to me. Like, I don't know, little things like that. So I guess I did want to just reemphasize, like, other creators, but especially a lot of just the communities online have really been a huge, like, I don't know, comfort in so many ways. So I don't want to just.
So sorry, Will, to cut you off, but a few folks need to go very soon. So let's get to the very last question. And I just got a bot in the chat, which is fun. I'll kick it later. So number 5, final question. What is something, positive or negative, that you wished was talked about, simply just talked about more concerning the topic of this panel?
I'm not sure on that one either. I think I have, like, quite a strange community, so I don't really know. Like, I think, like, a lot of my people are, like, marginalized in lots of ways. So I don't know. I always get new topics or anything. I can't think of anything that's, like, neglected at the moment. But come back to me maybe.
All right. So Finn.
I'm gonna say white queerness, or queer whiteness. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. I think that needs to be a more prominent topic. I think specifically that white queer people really need to do some examinations of the ways that we are sort of overrepresented. We need to do some examinations of the ways that we don't uplift the fact that like BIPOC queer people in particular are central to what we think of as queer culture, like the language, the style, the music, the history, like we have sort of taken a lot of credit for it without actually like recognizing where it comes from and honoring the voices that are still around. And I really, like of course, like Olu is sitting right here, and I know Luna as well probably has thoughts on this, like just being a person of color in queer spaces. So, like listening to the people that have actually had these experiences is one, but the thing that I really want to hone in on is like white queer people need to unpack what whiteness is. They need to unpack the power that it gives them. That's a serious, serious thing that a lot of them really shy away from, and we shy away from it because it's that whole thing where it's like, well, no, I'm oppressed on the grounds of being trans. I'm oppressed on the grounds of being gay. And they don't acknowledge the fact that it is a power, that it does influence our spaces, and that it affects our most marginalized people. It's a huge factor, particularly in online spaces. But I won't go into that. But the online visibility aspect of it is a pretty significant issue there.
Willow?
I don't really think of it other than just, definitely adding on to what Finn just said. Like, and we've seen that in a lot of those spaces too. So,
Luna?
Yeah, I think I'm probably echoing something similar from the same as the other panelists who've spoken, which is just like disability rights has the slogan "Nothing about us without us," and a lot of times, if you're in a marginalized space, it's really easy to feel like, well, we're in community, so we've got everybody covered just with us, and it's like, well, no, because like we're talking here and we've got a diverse panel, but we don't have anyone who's Hispanic talking about their experiences. And we don't have anyone who is, talking about their experiences as a trans woman. And like, you could easily just list for the next 10 minutes all the different identities that are marginalized that we do not have on this panel alone. So, sensitivity readers for your group is never a bad thing. And you can get sensitivity readers from someone who's less marginalized than you, quote unquote, because they are still marginalized in a different way than you, and their experience is still important, and hearing about it is still important. So, yeah, the more voices you have, the stronger you're going to be.
I just want to say to my audience and to my panelists, I tried to get as many people on this panel as possible. It was open to all sorts of people. I did not manage to get that many people, but I just want to say the kinds of people that Luna was mentioning and everyone else that is not represented on this panel, I did open this up to them, I at least as far as I'm aware. I mean, it was online, so I don't know everyone who's behind the username, but like, I did try. I promise.
Oh yeah, that was not a dig at you.
No, I know. I'm just being clear that like I am trying here. I am not. This was not on purpose, and I do apologize for not having those voices, but I did try.
You also got 3 different countries too, and different parts of the different countries. So like you did do a concerted effort, and I think once you get past 4 panelists, it starts to get really hard to keep something shorter without only like timing people's responses, and really you don't want to have to sit there and cut off people constantly.
Yeah, that's very true. So, Olu, I know especially since your laptop is dying, what have you got to say concerning this?
So I was going to say probably the only thing I can think of that you haven't said is like class, because I think especially online it's a lot of like you need to have all the lights and the camera and the internet connection and all this stuff to be able to like speak to people and like be heard. So I think a lot of the time, and obviously there's like the whole race-based aspect of like being online and being visible. But yeah, I think that's probably the main thing I would say.
Great. And for me, I think, what we were talking about with Yasmin Benoit, like every single part of her identity that it contributes to the hate she receives needs to be unpacked. The asexuality issues, the aromantic issues, the sexualization issues, the racism issues, all of those, all of them need to be talked about more, and they need to be talked about in ideally non-antagonistic conversation. I think it can get easy to on all sides, right? On both the sides of those affected and the sides of those who have the privilege, that it can slip into antagonism very easily, which is where the Oppression Olympic stuff comes in of, you know, why aren't you listening to me? I'm more oppressed than you. You need to listen to me. And often that comes from feelings of erasure rather than anything actually intentionally hostile. It's just like, I haven't been heard yet, so give me that space. And it can get very difficult to balance having those different spaces. And I think we need to get better at talking across experiences to each other in respectful ways, which is hard because we all do feel so erased and we all do feel so hurt, and we're dealing with our own traumas and everything like that, and you don't want to put more emotional labor on the people who are already dealing with so much, and there's so many different moving parts. But I think we all need to think about this of like, what experiences do I not recognize, and how do I have conversations with those people so that we can build a stronger community. And a bunch of people have to go, so that's where I'm going to end this today. Sorry we can't do a Q&A section or anything, but I'm trying to respect people's time. This was so great. I think we had a lot of really great conversations here today, and all of your perspectives were so valuable. And I'm gonna edit this a little bit, just get rid of some of the starting soon stuff, and then I'll upload it. And then feel free to share it wherever. Feel free to clip parts of it, put it on your own channel, anything like that. Just promote the initials, the original thing as well, for what the wider context. But this was amazing. This went about as well as I could have hoped. So thank you so much to everyone who came, and I appreciate that we were all able to find a day where we all could come, because I think every experience on this panel was vital to have here. So thank you so much. And anyone in the audience, feel free to add more comments or whatever after this ends, and etc. 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 People have to go. I will let you go. And this was amazing. Thank you so much, truly. And I guess my hands are doing this now, apparently. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much for organizing this.
Yeah,
Nice.
thank you.
It was my pleasure, and I hope to do more panels in the future. So I hope you keep your eye out for that in case your voice is a valuable one to add.
I'm always happy to add more on panels if you need my voice.
Great. Talk to everyone soon. Thank you so much.